living outside of California our entire lives, we're like, ooh, that's going to be really expensive. Like, would we actually, want to move there? Is it going to cost too much? Like, when we moved, of course, we rented. We had sticker shock. It was more than double what we were paying in Philly.
So why? Like, these people can clearly save more money and then they can do whatever they want with it. Yet, look, you're happy to rent, and as a landlord, they're happy to keep collecting rent from you. They just buy multiple properties out there, and so it's a weird thing that's happening there.
So we wanted to make sure that we had some level of safety, and I hit the job market interviewing with places, and my wife got a couple opportunities at 3 different hospitals. And when we tallied up what our offers were, it was significantly beyond what our margin of safety limit was. And so at that moment, we were like, holy cow, we're moving to California.
Are you curious how a Midwest family moved to the Bay Area and bought first a condo and then used that condo gains to trade up to a single family within 1.5 years? I'm going to be going through a live interview, and it's going to be a fantastic one because people, especially out of the area, do come into the Bay Area with a sticker shock. But there is a different way of thinking about it. It's just like how people buy Rolexes or Chanel's or Hermes bags. Those cost a whole lot more, but they are way more valuable, and it's actually a better buy buying those than buying 10 Casio watches. So I hope this interview is helpful. It gives people a great perspective, and this couple and this family is not even working in tech. Let's get into it. Okay, well, I'm excited about this interview, and I think a lot of people will take benefit of the journey that you guys went through. And let's just start from the beginning. You're not in tech.
Nope.
And you were able to buy a place in the Bay Area. And this is actually not the first transaction, right? Like, this is ultimately, I guess, a second, third transaction.
Yep.
It's just ultimately your second move. But I want people to learn a little bit more about yourself. Like, how long have you been in the Bay? What brought you to the Bay? And I think it'll be good for people to know, because a lot of people that are watching are in tech, but it's definitely very doable to start. You got to start somewhere and ultimately land in a really nice single family home. So tell us a little bit of the background of like what you do and where you came from. Yep. And what brought you to the Bay.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally, my wife and I are from Detroit, Michigan. Both of us were born and raised in that area. We graduated our respective degrees. I was in architecture at the time. She was in sports science, working on the insurance side. And she ultimately wanted to go back to school to become a nurse. So we kind of moved from Detroit to Philadelphia. We lived in Philadelphia for a couple of years, practiced architecture there while she went to school. She graduated and applied to hospitals all over. Ultimately got an opportunity at Sanford Hospital. And so we, really excited by the opportunity. But of course, living outside of California our entire lives, we're like, ooh, that's going to be really expensive. Like, would we actually, want to move there? Is it going to cost too much? Like any other generic, stereotypical thoughts, what processed through our minds. And so we understood, what we were making in Philadelphia. We understood what we could make if we moved back to Michigan. And we understood what kind of life we could kind of create for ourselves. So we said, okay, if we do make the jump to California, what is it going to take for us to make that jump? If we were to do a lateral move, we'd be making, X amount of money, but we wouldn't want to do a cross country move of that magnitude just for a lateral opportunity. We want to have some margin of safety before we moved, especially moving so far away from family. Philly to Detroit was quite a distance, but in 6 hours, family could be at our house in an emergency. Not quite the same moving to California. So we wanted to make sure that we had some level of safety. And I hit the job market, interviewing with places, and my wife got a couple opportunities at 3 different hospitals. And when we tallied up what our offers were, it was significantly beyond what our margin of safety limit was. And so at that moment, we were like, holy cow, we're moving to California.
Nice. Yeah.
It was a really surreal moment. But that really kind of just started the selling process of what California has to offer. And so when we moved here, we really started to live and explore and understand the true value of what the Bay Area has to offer. And although it's more expensive than anywhere else in the country, primarily, maybe it's competitions, Seattle or New York, maybe even Miami, southern Florida, but the Bay Area really has the whole package, right? If you want to experience snow, you can drive to Tahoe in a few hours and you can experience snow. If you want to be done with it, you drive a few hours back home. You don't deal with snow. The climate is temperate. It's, you got sweater weather through the winter, which is really comfortable and cozy. Summers get pretty hot, but not too hot. But if you really like the heat, you can go inland and it gets really, really hot. But if you want to break from it, 30 minutes to Santa Cruz and you're getting a relief, or anywhere on the coast, really. So the quality of life outside of the cost of living at the Bay Area offers a tremendous value. Living in Michigan, it would be extremely cold for 7 to 9 months out of the year, and those months it's pretty gray and cloudy and dreary. So that does a lot to people's state of mind or their mental health. And it's also really cold, so you're limited on what you can do outside, or exploration, or just being active. And so very quickly we realized the value proposition of living here, although it was expensive,
Mhm.
the value was far more tremendous than anywhere else that we'd ever lived.
Mhm.
And so immediately we were trying to think, how can we set down roots?
Right.
Where do we go from here? Because we moved here, we were renting, and of course we had sticker shock at the rental prices because they're twice as much.
Let's go over a little bit of the numbers, right? Like you
Yeah.
mentioned about the job side of it, and that's actually why a lot of people from all over the world
Mhm.
come to the Bay Area. But was it even a career improvement, or was it even the same exact role? Like you would have done the same exact thing in one city or another? And what percent is it, if you can kind of estimate or remember, from
Yeah.
like a Philly or something like that?
Yeah. So from Philly,
Yeah.
for both of us, it was a percentage increase. Doing the same
Same
type of
exact thing.
work, exact role responsibility, it was an increase, but it varies from myself to my wife. So for me, it was about want to say like a 15% increase, give or take. But for my wife, it was about 120% increase. It's really significant. And so that's what really drew us over that margin of safety that we were going for. And as each year goes on that we've lived here, we've always tracked
Mm.
what does it look like if we were to ever move back home,
Mm.
right? Because family's getting older,
Mm.
we started family, that has emotional impacts. So
Mm.
we're always kind of drawing back to check. And from a percentage standpoint, we would be living in a lower quality of life if we ever moved back
Mm.
from a percentage standpoint, because our job opportunity from a financial standpoint or number standpoint is so significantly less outside of California,
Right.
because the Bay Area economy
Right.
offers so much potential and growth opportunity.
And just for the people that know, because your wife works at a hospital, like what is the general profession of that? Because when people hear about that, same exact work,
Yeah.
like the same thing, right? And maybe, quite frankly, especially I remember we talked about it, like even the as working in the healthcare professional side, there's even not necessarily less work, but the amount of like healthcare professional to patients is also a different number,
Mhm.
right? But what was the actual like role itself for your wife to have that kind of change? Like, is it just a general nurse,
Yep,
or
exactly.
what is it? Yeah.
Yep, just a registered nurse, not specialized in any segment within the hospital. She's not a doctor or an anesthesiologist or anything like that. She's just a registered nurse. So she's just a general
Yeah.
nurse with no specialty. But what California has to offer really is more regulation within the hospital and healthcare
Yeah.
world, which is really nice. When she was working in Philly, the numbers or the ratios between patients assigned to a nurse was pretty unsafe.
Mm.
For the nurses, but more importantly for the patients themselves, because nurses operate in a 12-hour shift.
Mhm.
And she'd always been a night shift nurse, so that's always the graveyard shift. So there's challenges with that. But when you're having 6 to 8 to potentially 9 patients to one assigned to one nurse,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
hard for one person to really dedicate the required attention to those patients.
Mhm.
But moving to California, all of that was regulated, so she's not
Mhm.
allowed to have more than a certain number of patients. It's all regulated by the state and as well as their union,
Mhm.
because all the nurses in hospitals are unionized,
Mhm.
just to provide, excuse me, protections to the patients, but also to the nurses as well.
Mhm.
So from a stability and mental health and management side of things, it's really comfortable to work in
Mhm.
that environment in California as well.
And so, what year did you guys move to the Bay?
We moved in 2018, October 2018, so we've been here a little over 6 years.
Okay.
And when we moved, of course, we rented and we had sticker shock.
Mhm.
It was more than double what we were paying in Philly. And we lived in Center City, Philadelphia,
Mhm.
right next to the Liberty Bell on Market Street. So it was really kind of up and going and a lot going on. It was really, really cool. Um, and then we moved here into a rundown townhouse and paying more than double. And
Yep.
it's the same song and dance.
Yep.
And we're like, well, if we could just buy something,
Yep.
you look at the prices,
Yep.
and the value proposition from owning to renting
Right.
was just so flip flopped. Because from where I'm from, back in Michigan,
Right.
it's more affordable to own and pay a mortgage than it is to rent.
Yeah.
So
But yet, the funny part is, a lot of people don't do it.
exactly, they,
I
they
mean,
don't.
I mean, there's a lot of interesting things, whether it's in the Midwest or these other places in that part of the country. When you run the numbers, you're like, okay, typically the spread of owning to rent is like, it's generally a good idea, yet they don't.
Mhm.
So it's a really interesting thing. And then what happens though is a lot of investors, they just buy multiple properties out there because look, you're happy to rent, and as a landlord, they're happy to keep collecting rent from you. And so it's a weird thing that's happening there, in terms of uh, not necessarily affordability, but just I don't know if it's mindset or anything else. It's just a very interesting thing. But here, especially, and I'll bring up a point on that. Like the rent to owning spread is going to be some of the highest that you have in the entire country in the Bay Area as a metro. But here's an interesting fact too. In the best areas, think of places like a Palo Alto or like a Mountain View, and you can think about how much those homes cost:
Mhm.
$3 million, $4 million. Those actually rent spreads are even greater in the best of areas than a place like San Jose.
Right.
So why? Like these people can clearly save more money and then they can do whatever they want with it. Yet they are more than happy to spend that money to buy that home than to pay the rent. Right. So there's something going on there why people are still doing that. And so that's kind of an interesting tell. And those are very wealthy people, right? And those are people that are doing very well. I have fortunately many clients that are in that category. They obviously can invest the money in stocks, cryptos, whatever they want, but they still buy that house. Right. And a big part of it, I think, is a combination of things. One, the value of it tends to do very well because it's very protected. Like there's not many houses that are being built there ever. Like Palo Alto, like how many new construction have you seen in the last decade there?
Yeah, not many.
Not many,
Yeah.
if any, right? And never mind if it was like a single family,
Mhm.
straight up zero, like straight up zero, right? And so that creates the supply side of things. Yet there's people that keep earning more and more over time,
Yeah.
right? And so that has a lot to do with it. So it's kind of interesting on that side. But I want you to also talk about it too. Like you also have the choice to just keep renting. You'll be making the spread, right? Because you're making way more money, and yes, your rent is double, but you're still going to be theoretically saving way more,
Yeah.
right?
And that's exactly what
Yeah.
we observed, right? So I kind of did a value proposition for like our personal situation and
Yeah.
tracked a spreadsheet and tried to forecast what that would look like 1 year to 5 years to 10 years. And it was evident, right? Renting gives you the ability to save more money per month. You have higher income in the Bay Area, so you're able to, pack away more money as long as you don't allow lifestyle creep to kind of get too inflated.
Yep.
If you manage that effectively for yourself. And so we were bought into the fact that we were saving more than we'd ever saved in our life before, while spending more than we'd ever spent on life requirements and bills and utilities than ever before.
Mhm.
We're going to sit and save, and in 5 years, we'll have this amount of money. We're saving and investing, so projected out this amount of money. Maybe we'll look at real estate purchasing in 5 years from now. Maybe not, because why would we need to if we have the ability to save so much? With the value proposition of renting, because renting the same property that you own, it's about 3 times more expensive per month if you were to do a standard mortgage with 20% down,
Sure.
as opposed to what the rental rates would be for that same exact home. And so I thought that was astronomical. Why would I ever want to buy if I could save? So 5 years come and go, 3 years come and go, and I'm tracking the trend line. And even if you pull out the spike of COVID for the real estate, you just follow the trend line. The trend line of the equity growth surpasses our savings rate
Yes.
significantly.
Yes.
There's absolutely no way our savings rate, even if our stocks and investment portfolio continue to do as it perform as well as they have been, there's absolutely no way we'd be able to keep up with the growth rate of real estate in the Bay Area. And sure, that may slow down over the course of time, but in the grand scheme of things, when you think about the value of these properties, even if it slows down to an 8% growth or 5% growth, the principal starting price is going to continue to surpass our growth rate of savings, right? When you were to compare the two,
Right.
and so year 3, that became like a strong realization. Like,
Yes.
we have to figure out a way to jump on the tidal wave
Yes.
and find a way to make it work. And for us, we had a budget, and we could either buy an existing home that was really run down, that posed a lot of risk for maintenance or repairs, or anything else that was unforeseen, or we could take that money and buy a new construction condo in the East Bay. Both options were in the East Bay, and we're immediately drawn to new construction because buying direct to a builder offered a lower price per square foot, because there were no agent fees, there were no commissions, it was just straight to the point, and they also had the ability to offer credits through the negotiation process, which gave us more opportunity for value, to extract value from that deal. And we found an opportunity where we were able to just enter into a new construction condo, and we said, okay, I think in maybe 5 years we should have an equity growth good enough for us to maybe transfer from one property to the next, because ultimately our goal was a single family home. We wanted a single family home to not share walls. My wife and I had been together for almost 10 years, and we'd always shared a wall, and so that was something that we never grew up with, and we always knew we wanted to have that for ourselves and for our family, and of course we wanted to start a family as well. And
I'll take a quick pause on that because there's a few big key things, and I'll also comment on a few of them. I want people to also understand a little bit about this, right? So you actually rented in a really good area first, right? I think you rented in Los Gatos,
Yep.
right? And so that's also something that people also have to be mindful of. Like if you're renting in Los Gatos, I mean, Los Gatos is a really nice place, but there's also only so many different types of housing there, even new construction, and also different budgets, right? And so one of the really good things that their family had done was also understanding realistically they can buy up to X. That X was not in Los Gatos. Right, there's no chance.
Yeah.
Like if you're looking at the East Bay and looking at Los Gatos, I mean, they're completely different markets. Like the cost is way different, and the type of housing of supply is way different. And so that's very important. Like, yes, there is going to be some level. So you can't get everything. If you want everything, you better be able to pay that price for everything. But the objective was you did that not basic math, but you did that calculation of, okay, well, I mean, this doesn't make any sense. Like if I keep renting, it's just going to be worse and worse. I got to get into something, but I also got to be realistic. Where can I get something that would be able to meet needs for X amount of years? And so I think there's a huge credit to that, because not a lot of people are able to do that, and they get stuck in a lock, right? Because if they're just renting and they love Los Gatos, but they're paying X amount, they're probably paying actually a good amount of rent, and they're not willing to make an adjustment, right? I mean, places in the East Bay are further out, but they're not like, it's not like 2 hours out. We're not talking about like Sacramento or anything like that. But a lot of people do get stuck with that, and I think that's a big credit. Related to a little bit about new construction, because new construction is an option for many, but at the same time, you also have to be mindful. Like they were able to be successful in new construction because they're also able to go to specific areas. But if you are not okay with certain areas, there may not be new construction, period, right? So like, for example, if they were like, look, I have to live in the peninsula or something, there's not many new construction there. So you don't want to just like bank on this whole strategy of that. Like they were like, okay, we're open to East Bay. We have this budget. We have different things in mind. This commute is good, okay enough. All right, what are the products? And fortunately, there was some options.
Yeah.
And I would also comment, like, and then I'll ask a few questions too. Also comment about the buying with the builders. Well, to be fair, almost every builder, I help a lot of people buy new construction homes too, and we can represent them. And you're not necessarily actually going to get a bigger discount. I think you got a really good deal at the time too because of you actually end up buying a place when things were not looking good. Because at that time it was rough. And so to give people an idea, I love to share it. Like the time I think you guys bought it was like September 2022.
Yeah.
So if you look at the chart and look back on it, right, prices were going down like fast because if you look at the interest rates at that time, were going up very quickly. And so when things change like that, the market will take a pause because buyers are like, oh, when does this end? Builders are like, should I decrease? Oh wait, I got this turnover rate I got to do. So you were able to get like a lot of those good deals, mainly because of that timing. Because now if you look at some of these places, they're still selling very well and they don't necessarily need to negotiate anything at all. But for most new construction, I will be able to help. So feel free to we can chat about those options. There are some builders that do not pay anything upfront, right? And we can always talk about that so you understand that. But what I want to ask and point out in this case is your goal ultimately was a single family though. So what gave you the courage or the insights to start somewhere, like a condo that you ultimately bought in? Because some other people may say, look, I'm just going to save indefinitely for a single family and one day I'll get a single family, which is not that simple. So like, what was the thing that allowed you outside? Was it only the math calculation where like, I got to start with something and then I can trade up? Or what gave you the confidence, like I'll start with this instead of just keep saving for years and years and hopefully you get a single family?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both, right? Because buying a condo gave us a price point to still allow us to save a significant amount of money. So we weren't able to save as much as when we were renting, but we were still able to save a significant and invest, a decent amount of money. So there was confidence in that, and then there was confidence that okay, we found a way to enter the tidal wave of California equity. Let's ride this wave and let's hope for the best. And so that was really the mindset: is just find a way to get into the market, and eventually over time we're going to trade up. And we knew we were getting ready to start a family. We knew we had somewhere in the time horizon of 5 to 7 years before we had to get serious about schools and things of that nature. And over the course of 5 to 7 years, sure, condos certainly underperform when compared to townhomes and single families, especially here in the Bay Area. But that was enough time horizon for me to feel confident in the growth of equity. And you couple that with our savings, I felt like we would be ready, in that time horizon to then transfer to a single family home in due time if we were to, stay committed to that plan.
And there's obviously surprises with it, right? Because even in your best forecast, when we got connected, there was no forecast that the turnaround time, because you didn't own the condo for long. I mean, think about this. This is a recording in November of 2024.
Yep.
And so if you bought in September, no. To be fair, so you made actually a reservation.
Yeah, we went under contract.
Under contract in 2022. And this is new construction. So new construction is going to be different. It's not instant. Like this was a home that was not even built yet.
Yeah.
So you actually got your keys in May
yeah.
2023.
Yep.
Right? Which is what, 18 months ago?
Yeah,
18 months ago. And so even though generally as a whole condos don't appreciate over a long period of time, and that's not always the case. I think people will be shocked, as you probably were shocked, and I was actually pleasantly shocked as to how much it actually increased because of your timing of things. And timing is some of his luck, but it's also the courage. Like you did go in when it seemed like the world was ending at that point, right? But I think gains wise from your entry point to actually when we sold the place, that profit was the value of I think was what 15 to 20%.
Yeah.
For a condo.
It was 24.6%.
For a condo flat, this is not a condo townhome style. Like it's not like that kind of townhome. It's like a condo flat, right? That was in equivalent to about, I think, 14, 15 months. We sold a little bit before, 14, 15 months, right? And so not only that, I think the other thing that people really need to understand is even though that was the gain of the value of the place, the beauty of owning a place and the beauty of that strategy, of that trade up, is that you didn't buy it all cash, right? You bought with a regular loan. Let's say you put 20% down or 30% down, whatever it may be. And so when you got those returns relative to the size of your loan, that's what makes this stepping stone so powerful for most, right? Because your 20% gain of in the 15 months wasn't the real number. It was actually 4 or 5x that relative to how much capital you put in.
Exactly.
And it was tax free because, well, actually, no, sorry, it wasn't tax free in this case because you didn't own it for 2 years, but it was just a relative capital gains tax, right? And so that was, I think, the thing that was really coming. Basically, effectively, I think what that meant was you pretty much basically doubled your initial investment roughly within 14, 15 months.
A little more than double after you subtract taxes, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the idea, right? So that is the underlining thing that I think people really should realize about this. Is it's not about you saving indefinitely, unless obviously you work at specific companies, you could do that, but most are not in that boat. But there's clearly a process to get there, and there's nothing wrong with buying a condo or a townhome, and there's nothing wrong with even buying a place that's not your forever home, as long as you know like this is a part of the stepping stone on the path. Right? Like a lot of my clients now, like they're buying some really nice homes, they're buying in Palo Alto, these places. They live in the East Bay too. They buy like a townhome, right? They lived in that, but they lived in it for like 5 to 10 years. Right? That is exactly how people get started. And then they save more money. Good things may happen. They can take those gains from that home and or career things occur, and then they can buy the next place. Right? So walk us through then the thought process of I know initially you were going to use the condo finds and the gains from that to then move into and try to get into a single family. So walk us through like what you initially thought the thought process was logistically to accomplish that versus after we got connected, like how we actually execute on that.
Yeah, so I knew in order for us to be competitive in a single family, we had to find a way to be non-contingent. But because we were below the 2-year threshold and we were exposed to tax implications on the sale of our home, I didn't want to rush the process. And right now, at this time of recording, we're also experiencing a slowdown in the market, and so inventory is low. It's starting to creep back up, but in the neighborhoods that we were looking at, inventory is still pretty scarce, I'd say.
Sure. Yeah.
We knew renting in the Los Gatos area, we wanted to come back to this region. We knew we wouldn't be able to necessarily maybe buy in the same neighborhood that we rented, but as long as we could border it, we could have the same grocery stores, the same dentist, all of our same everything. So the creature comforts were there. And so we knew what pockets in Cambrian and kind of South San Jose where we wanted to be to still border that. And there wasn't enough inventory on the market in those areas for us to feel confident enough to sell and then find our forever home, right? So we knew we wanted to be here for at least the next 30 years to raise our family. So we, initially I'm like, well, the only thought process is, well, if something pops up, I'd like to submit an offer, but I'm not willing to sell our home. So we'd always be contingent on sale.
Right.
And I knew that as a reality, and I was comfortable in that position. Like, I also figured we were going to lose 3 or 4 homes before we actually got a bid that was accepted.
3 or 4 homes would have been good too.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, keep going.
So, that was just the reality that I was allowing to sink into my mindset. And that was something that my wife and I would have conversations about nightly, just trying to kind of manage our mindset and expectations. So we didn't have peaks and valleys in our emotional roller coaster as we kind of went through that process. That was the reality that we understood, and we accepted that for what it was. And we talked to a few different realtors through the process to kind of meet and greet just to see, who we fit best with. And when we reached out to Spencer, it was an immediate fit. We were stuck together super glue. It was a really good fit, and he gave us a lot of confidence. And along with that confidence, he definitely applied a little bit of pressure of wanting to sell our home because he had never seen somebody have a successful bid off of a sale and contingent home. But that was something that we were okay with. We didn't want to sell our home and put our family in a position of having to rent back our home for 1 or 2 months and then potentially having to settle on a home that maybe we weren't necessarily fully in love with, but needed to buy a home to move out of the home that we had already sold. And so we took some time to think about it. We've had many conversations, and ultimately we said, look, we're not comfortable selling our home. We want to do a contingent on sale. And we knew that wasn't going to win us a house, especially in the neighborhoods that we wanted to move to. And so we were, I guess you'd call us hopeless romantics. Right?
Sure. Dreamers. That's what we call it.
And there was a home in a neighborhood that we knew we wanted to move to that was open. So we went to an open house. It was up for sale. And we reached out to you on the Saturday afternoon after we went to open house and got the disclosure, started looking through it, and started to escalate conversation Sunday evening, only to get a surprise email from the selling agent saying, don't even bother because we've accepted an early offer. And so that kind of faced us, that threw us on our heels. We're like, wow, this is a lot more competitive than I had ever imagined before, because we didn't even have the opportunity to sit at the table to place an offer. We were shooting away before. So that was really discouraging. But it still didn't make me change my mind about how we wanted to enter our offer. Right. And so we knew that there was a home in the neighborhood that was listed as coming soon, but it wasn't listed. So we kind of laid dormant for a couple of weeks. And when you reached back out to us to check in, we asked you to check in on this home, and you connected us with the MLS and gave us some really good information and insights to the property and what it looked like before it was formally listed. So to have that insider access was really, really nice and comforting. And from the moment that we saw the photos of the home, my wife and I looked at each other and we were like, this is the home.
Yeah, it was nice.
I don't know how we can get this home, but this is the home that we act on. And so we thought about it for a few days. We reconnected with you and we told you what our mindset was. And you were pretty frank with us and said, unless we increase our offer position, there's no way we'll get this home. Right. We were okay with that. And if this was one of the homes that we lost, that was okay. We were expecting to lose 3 or 4 homes that we fell in love with. Right. And
actually, let me take a quick pause on that side. So to explain, when you have a home and you want to get a new home, you have a few options, and it's all relative to your own finances. It's also relative to your level of risk. Now, I'm not going to push anybody to do whatever. It's up to you, but at least you can, every individual can see this. So option 1, of course, if you have the money, as in you have the entire down payment and you have the income and you can literally just buy the new home and then decide what to do with your home, you would go with that. That's the least amount of friction, the least amount of risk, right? But the catch is not that many people will have that kind of money and liquidity. So, but if you are in that category, then it's really simple. You have option 2, which is you would sell the home first, and you would best case ask for a long rent back. And the logic of that is that you would then have the funds, right? Because then you have the cash to then be able to make strong offers. based non-contingent offers because you're doing that, or you can kind of already make stronger offers while you're in contract. And but the catch of that is you do have a time duration. Otherwise, you will need to find a place to rent, right? You need to go find a place as a temporary place. So the pro and con about that is the pro is you have the liquidity. It's something that allows you to have the liquidity. The con is you have the risk of feeling like you're going to be homeless.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no other way to explain that, right? And so some people in that case, that's their only option. They have to do that. So they sell the place, then they find a temporary place to rent. I literally just helped a client. We sold the place for $2.8 million. They lived in that place for like 10 years. But they also knew like, look, we're downsizing. And so we will sell it. We are okay to find a 6-month rental, and then I'll help them find a much smaller home. So there are a lot of people that do that, and that's suitable, right? For many people. And then there's the way that we explore to do it, because I also gave them the pros and cons about it, right? So our situation was we couldn't do number one, or didn't want to do number one, both. Number two, didn't want to do number two because of the kind of time pressure or the constraints. So then we went with basically number three, which is a really difficult one to succeed, and I'll tell you why momentarily. But we did a contingent on sale. So what does that mean, or how does that work? We would make an offer, just like we were buying a house for somebody else. We make an offer that's contingent on us selling our current place, which is not even on the market yet. That's the term. So the closing time is much longer, right? Because like we're not even in contract yet. We still gotta put on the market. We gotta get offers. It has to go smoothly, right? And so the time to close is longer. And the catch for the seller accepting that is there's more risk, because if we don't sell it, or you say, look, I want to sell your house for a much higher money number than the market, like it's just not going to sell. And then it's all that lost time for the seller, because during that 2, 3, 4 weeks, it's just contingent, and they lose all momentum. Mm-hmm. And so so that was obviously very tough, and that's part of the reason why it doesn't get accepted too often. But there's a few reasons why we were able to at least even consider it. Number one, the market wasn't like red hot. Like it wasn't like the spring where everything was selling within a week and it's just really, really competitive. The market had hit like a summer low, which is normal. That's very common. Number two, you guys did a really good job of following the advice. Is think about it. If you were going to accept a contingent on sell of a home, you better have everything lined up so that if an offer was accepted, we were literally on the market the following day, which we were. Right? We did all the reports in advance, we did all the photos in advance, we did everything in advance. We had everything lined up, right? So that if you did get any offer accepted, it was also an important and key thing, because the listing agent also reached out to me and I had to defend it. I said, look, this number is very doable. Here's the exact number we're going to go in at. We have everything lined up. Inspection reports are done. Here's the comps of the other one. Here's why we think we hit this. Photos are done. So if you accept an offer today, we will put on the market tomorrow. Right? Because everything was ready to go. Mm-hmm. So it was a huge credit for you guys to follow that program, because others would be like, look, I don't know how long it will be. I'm not going to spend the $1,500, $2,000 or whatever for photos, inspection reports, all this stuff. Let's just wait and see. But why would the seller consider that? Because best case, it's another 1 or 2 weeks for you to even put your home on the market then.
Right.
So like, if you're going to go with that approach, it is still doable today, maybe for the next couple of months, until then the spring season, which I think will be really, really difficult. But if you were even consider doing that, then you got to get everything lined up, right? You got to make it as easy to absorb as possible. But you also have to remember, like, you're going to be at a big disadvantage. So be mindful from the price perspective, right? Like, you can't just be like, look, I'm going to straight up compete with a non-contingent offer for the same price. Mm-hmm. Like, you got to understand that that's the scenario for them to even consider our offer, even with that big risk, because the contingent on sale protects you entirely. Like, if you couldn't get your home sold, it's a lot of work that we've done, but you're not losing your deposit. You're not losing anything. Mm-hmm. Like, you keep your 3% deposit, which in this case could be $50,000 plus, right? So a lot of the risk is on the seller side in in that scenario. And so that was one of the things that you guys did a really good job of just following that and just being ready to go, right? As soon as we did get an offer accepted, or your signs of it, we're already getting some things kind of moving in the background, mm-hmm. right? Now, now that being said, and this is part of what I love to hear from you. It's crazy nerve-wracking, right? And it's crazy anxious. I don't know if nerve-wracking is the right word. Maybe it's anxious, right? It's probably both. Yeah. All right, it is both, because there's so many things that have to move well, right? Like, think about it. We're basically doing 2 transactions simultaneously, and the downside is one of them is completely out of our control, right? The selling of the house is completely out of control. You're not the one making an offer for your own house, right? You're not the one cutting the check. We got to rely on the other side that likes it, that makes the offer, that does what they need to do to proceed. But walk me through and this is like, walk me through like the worst of it. I'd love to just hear the worst of it, because it's good for people to know. And then I would also love to hear, was there any moment that it was like, you can get a sigh of relief? Like, when was the moment that, like, even though not all the work was done, was there any moment of that journey? Because the journey was about 45 days or so. Yeah. That's the lowest point, and then maybe the highest point.
Yeah, absolutely. So two key things in order to execute, right? You have preparation. Yeah. And then a realistic expectation of what it's going to take to execute it if everything was to align perfectly, right? And so working with you helped us really understand thoroughly with confidence what it was going to take to be successful in both those areas. And so being proactive with the preparation of getting photos, taking care of getting inspections, it's all taken care of in the background by you and your team. And so that gave us a little bit of relief and confidence in what we were able to do. Second thing is understanding the reality of the situation. When you're contingent on sale outside of California, well, specifically where we were born and raised in Michigan, the Midwest, every sale is contingent on sale. Nothing is non-contingent. And when we were talking to friends and family from back home about what we were going through, and they said, well, is it contingent on inspection? Did you have the inspector come through? Did you do this? They started asking all these questions. And it's like, look, we're only contingent on the sale of our home. Everything else is non-contingent. And I got so many like stares, death stares. I even got a, are you an idiot? Response from some people. And it makes you laugh because our market is so different here in California. And so with being contingent on sale puts us at a huge disadvantage. So the only way to overcome that is to be willing to pay a premium. And so understanding what that premium should be, am I okay with that? Can we overcome that premium? Like what is it going to take? And again, we work in healthcare and we work in construction, architecture and construction. So we don't have tech money or the investments stocks that come with that. It's all kind of just modest living, modest salaries. And so finding a way to accept that purchase price and find a path to yes for what we think would be a winning offer was really the big challenge. And so that's where a lot of our angst and stress really started to derive from. Was I had confidence that if we were accepted, we would execute because of the confidence that you and your team had provided us. I also had confidence in what we were selling. The reason why we bought what we bought, where we bought, was because of my market analysis from a couple of years prior. I had started to track, downward pressure from the peninsula through San Jose and up into Milpitas. I was tracking that real estate pressure or real estate value increasing. In Newark, we sold in Newark, and Newark was really at that threshold. And once that threshold kind of like pushed through Milpitas, Newark was next. And so my time horizon was 5 to 7 years, but from your market analysis, it was now.
Yep.
And what we had to sell.
Well, to be fair, remember, my market analysis was actually, I gave a range with what your home was worth, and we sold within that range. But remember this was a 20% increase in 14 months. So obviously when you saw the number, you're like, that's a for many places, that's a 6-7 year horizon.
Yeah.
Right. Now, there are some places, unfortunately, we bought in specific locations in San Francisco. Like I helped a client sell in San Francisco, but their home basically never even appreciated in 20 years. So that's part of the reason why too, like that 5-year initial goal was a fair goal for that kind of percentage.
Right.
But it happened already in 15 months.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like, okay, yeah, maybe it can go more, but I mean, this is like crazy good already in terms of like relative speaking.
Yeah.
Right.
So we got to the point where we had confidence on our side of the deal. We had a commitment to what we needed to offer in order to be competitive with what we were coming to the table with. The next step was funding, right? And so because we didn't have large cash deposit for a down payment, the majority of our down payment was tied up in equity in a home that we weren't selling until after we had received an accepted offer on a home that we want to buy. So from a banking standpoint and lending standpoint, that created plenty of hurdles for us to jump over. And that was stressful.
Yeah.
Because at this time, rates were starting to come down, but then, of course, when we started to have those conversations, they started going back up again. Our down payment primarily was tied in equity of a home that we haven't sold yet. We didn't have major cash flow. We didn't have tech stocks sitting in the background that we could tap into. And so finding a way to navigate the lending process, living where or wanting to move to where we wanted to move, working where we worked, it was a really big challenge. And we're honest people, honest jobs, and we live modestly. And we thought what we were striving for was achievable, but the lending definitely made us feel differently. And so that added pressure to our stress and anxiety through the process. But we kept not taking no for an answer and kept pushing and kept trying to find ways to be creative because we had the funding. It was just transferring the funding from one position to the next position was the challenge and have the buy-in. So we ended up working with a lender that a credit union that we've been with ever since we moved here. So we had a relationship with them. And once we connected the whole team, so Spencer entered the conversation and we worked together as a collaborative team, that's where the confidence from the lending side really increased. And all of a sudden the friction started to release as we got closer to making an offer. And we submitted the offer and they were dead silent all day, and we tried to check in with them. And Spencer was knocking on their door, trying to provide us with any sense of security that we were asking for. But the seller agent was zipped their lips. So we immediately kind of, I'd say midday, a few hours after we submitted our offer, felt that we'd lost it. Like there was no chance. And of course, we'd already had that expectation when we submitted our offer. So we already felt defeated before we submitted the offer, which helped with that management of emotion.
So one of the strategies that I tell everybody, not strategies, but one of the disciplines I always have, right, is always never fall in love with the house. Even though it's an incredible looking house, you can even see a little bit of the backdrop, but never fall in love with it because you never really know. Like it's out of your control. Like if someone wanted to spend an extra $50,000-$100,000 on the same exact house, it's over. Like it's game over, and there's nothing you can do about it. So there's no reason to complain about it. It's just a reality. Just move on, right? But obviously, it still sucks, right? Because you still spent the time to go look at it. You're already envisioning like where things could be, how your life can be. But that's the part of the game, right? It's a journey, right? It's a journey of everything. It's always a journey. Some journeys can be fortunately very fast, but some may take some time. So it's sometimes a marathon. But what was really good for them is they still had the confidence and the knowing to go and try, right? Especially in this market, you really never know. And you always try. You always try your best. You also don't be like, look, I'm just gonna lowball them and then be like, oh, why did I lose? You don't want to do any of that. You still try your best, but that way, if you lose, you knew like, look, I tried my best. It didn't work. Move on to the next one.
And that's the reality of the market out here. There's always going to be somebody with more money than you, and there's always going to be somebody who's willing to pay a little bit more than what you're willing to pay. And the neighborhoods that we were looking into, schools are incredible, and that's really what drew us here. Is we want to raise our family, we want incredible schools for our kids to go to, and I know people are willing to pay a significant amount of money for that. And so we just had the expectation that we were going to try our best, and if it wasn't good enough, eventually, hopefully, it will be good enough.
Right.
But it was just having enough confidence to take that step and to make an offer,
Yeah.
Which I think is a big hurdle for a lot of people. And even colleagues that I work with, I'm also working with people who are in the same situation that I'm in, who aren't working in tech. They don't have tech stock investments through their employment, and they're saying, how did you do this? How are you moving into a single family in South San Jose and Cambridge? How is this your second home? And really, it's just having the confidence in yourself and in your own finances to make the initial entry into the real estate. And maybe it's not something that you want. Maybe it's not something that makes you feel comfortable. Like Newark wasn't our ideal area that we wanted to live long term or to certainly raise a family, but we knew that it was an opportunity for us to enter, build equity, and eventually trade up because we needed that tool in our tool belt to get us to where we wanted to go.
Right.
And so ultimately, it's just having the confidence to take that step, knowing that you'll be able to kind of get through that time horizon, whatever it may be for each individual situation. For us, we were planning 5 or 7 years, but to our surprise, it was much shorter than that.
Yep.
But making sure that you just take that step is key, because if you don't and you sit on the sidelines, you'll quickly realize that you'll always be playing catch up.
Yeah.
And you'll never outpace the market.
I think that's the thing for most. Like, if you listen through this entire thing, there was nothing about timing a market. There wasn't anything of that, because that's one, incredibly hard and maybe nearly impossible. But two, like, how do you know when's the right time, and are you going to be active at that time? Right. I think that's the biggest thing that people think that they can do. Right. Like, how accurate have you all been at picking stocks? If you've been really accurate at that, then you may just sell everything and just buy and trade stocks all day. But the reality is incredibly hard, and practically impossible. But there's also a plan, right? Like, you go through your progressions. You go from renting into some sort of ownership. It could be a condo, town, single family, depending on your own situation. And then over time, you don't have to worry about that for a while. Like, I'm sure you didn't need to think about when you buy your condo, you didn't have to think about what I'm going to do next right away. You'll reassess it down the road when needs change. And then when there's enough things built up, then we can go over the next plan. But those are different milestones. Some people may take, in this case, fortunately, within a year and a half. Some people take 3 to 5 years. That's okay, right? And then it will be stressful. Like, I'm not sugarcoating that the whole process of buying, it's stressful, but it's also relative, right? It's stressful because you're doing something different, because you're actively looking again. You're going to be making offers. You're going to feel like they're saying no to you, like personally, but they're not, right? But you also just remember in general, like, this is also a finite amount of time, right? In their case, they had a 5-year plan. Things got accelerated a lot quicker. And now they're at the single family that they will probably live in for a very, very, very long time. So this is not something they have to even think about anymore. So this milestone's all gone. But it wouldn't have ever happened unless they had, one, the math calculation. Number two, find a place that actually could work, right? That was available at that time of where they were at. And then also then using those gains to then be able to trade up to buy this one. Because none of you are working in tech. So for those that are working in tech, you may have a lottery ticket, right? That's one of the benefits of being in the Bay Area. Is a lot of people in tech, you're a software engineer, you may have a straight up lottery ticket. And that's one of the most incredible things here. But not everybody will have that circumstance. Nor do you necessarily need it, right? Like there are plenty of people that are in healthcare and in other professions that are not in tech, that don't have that upside, but they're still buying places, and still, they're not talking about it though. The media will never talk about it. But one cool thing is, I'll also share this. Like, I had some, like, you never know who actually owns a lot of properties, and that's kind of the beauty of the Bay. Like, here in the Bay, not many people show off too much. Like, you don't see too many Ferraris here. But clearly, if you look at how much things cost, a lot of people be buying supercars all day, every day. But that's one of the cool things. But it doesn't get talked a lot. So I have like a lot of people that I know, and they're in their 40s or 50s. They did not make a lot of money, as in they didn't make, like, they weren't like CEOs of companies and all of a sudden millions of dollars. But they took different milestones, right? They owned one property, kept it for 5-7 years. They may have kept it or rented it out. They just bought another one. Over time, it naturally accrues, just like anybody's savings when you invest, right? And so I think that is a great credit to you guys. That's why I wanted to share the story, because a lot of people are like, look, they may or may not feel trapped, especially coming from an area where the housing price there is 5 times less than what it is here. Probably, yeah, it actually is. But it still makes a lot of financial sense. There's a reason. And this is the thing. I also want to end with this. And this is an interesting fact. So I mentioned this stat earlier about Palo Alto. So Palo Alto, as I mentioned, the spread of renting to owning is the highest amongst most cities. And the better the area is the same. Los Altos, Hillsborough, it's all the same, right? Like, you can spend $8,000-$9,000 a month in rent for a single family, and it'll cost about equivalent to that home, maybe about $3 to $3.5 million. So that spread is the worst. But here's an interesting fun fact too, for a lot of people to know. in a place like Palo Alto, did you know that 50% are renters? So you just a few things you can learn about that. One, there's a lot of renters that are obviously paying to be in the school system there. But the more interesting fact is this: a lot of people own multiple homes in Palo Alto. That's the crazy part about it all, right? And that's the amazing part about it. They're not boasting about it, but think about it: who owns it? It's not institutions. There's no institutions that are owning any of these properties here in the Bay Area. Fortunately, like we don't have to compete with like BlackRock and all these other entities. The game is different here, but it's also great insights. And look, a lot of people are just now they didn't buy 10 properties all in a year. It took decades to do. But it's also a really, really powerful and good goal setting thing to have when now you realize something like that, where once again, as I mentioned, it's way cheaper to rent in theory, but people will still be happy to be buying and selling into those areas all day, every day. Yeah. And they're also the most resistant to price drops, right? Because if the economy doesn't do well and prices do drop, those areas people would love to have always like the people in Sunnyvale or Mountain View would have always loved to get in Palo Alto. And if the prices dropped a little bit, then now it goes into the budget and they can get in. So those areas, the better the area, also has even more price protection when it comes to a down market. Yep. Right. Any final thoughts or anything else you want to share? I know we spoke for about 50 minutes now.
Yeah.
So, but,
yeah. I'd like to just kind of leave with maybe some inspiration. Obviously, coming from the background that we come from, there were significant challenges to entering the market and getting to ultimately where we landed. But our story can be recreated by anybody else. It just takes a little bit more creativity on your end. If you're working in tech, you do have that lottery ticket, so that's great. Take advantage of it and do what you will with it. But for other people who may not have that lottery ticket, it's going to take you a little bit longer. It's going to take some more creativity, some more mathematics per se, and more discipline. There wouldn't be a way for us to execute what we executed if we were carrying large amounts of debt, student loan debt, car debt. So it was very important for us to prioritize all of that, to put it behind us so that we could really free up our budget and finances to allow us to kind of snowball our rent into a mortgage payment. Because ultimately we knew like where we wanted to rent to what we were or what we wanted to buy from what we were renting was going to cost us 2.5 to 3 times more. And so finding a way to kind of squirrel that budget into an area within your finances was hard to do, but not impossible. Yeah. And so never give up. And I'll touch on the highs, the peaks, and the lows of the whole process. Kind of a quick timeline. The first kind of peak of stress was finding a path to the number that we wanted to place an offer from a lending standpoint. Once we got to that point, we were like we're riding high. Like we felt really good. And you're like, well, you still got to get the offer accepted. So that brought us back down to earth. We submitted the offer, and we felt really good that we had the opportunity to sit at the table and make the offer. Right. And then it was dead silent. Then we're stressed out again. Okay. Like, oh no, we lost it. Darn. Go through that. And then we get the text from you at 6 o'clock saying, congratulations, you got the house. And we're like, oh my God, this is incredible. Yeah. We were cheering, and you're like, don't cheer too much. Just we got our second job to do, and that was to sell our home. That's right. And we had a lot up against us. We were listing it the Thursday before Labor Day weekend. So of course everybody has plans. It's a long weekend, nobody's in town. So there's some resistance, on that. Right. But went through open house and received an offer, all cash offer. And it was above asking. And so, we went from the low point, shot right back up to the height, and we're like, oh my God. But there was a bit of hesitation from the buyer, and that kind of like made us teeter, and we started falling back down and kind of went back and forth for a day or two. Yeah. And then locked in an offer. So then we were flying high again. But what you informed us with is it's not over till it's over. Correct. And so, waiting through that 2.5 week period until we closed was pretty nail biting, because at any point you could have walked out. And people that are placing all cash offers, even though they lay down their earnest money, it's a nickel in the bucket for them. Yeah, so. I mean, it's a lot of money, right? 3% is 3%, right? And many of the homes here, that's still equivalent to $30,000 to $100,000 pretty easily. But you never know, right? Like if they lose their job and they're like, forget this, right? Like, because even when you guys got into contract, a lot of people, it made sense at that time for people to walk away from those new construction homes. It actually made financial sense to do it. Like if you have 3% of the line, but the market at that point was dropping by 10, 15%. Mm-hmm. You might as well try to negotiate with the builder if you could, but then otherwise you might as well just straight up walk from it. Yeah. Right. So you never really know about these things. Like it actually would have made financial sense for those at that time, not in our situation, but you just really never know. So until the cash hits your account, and then you ultimately got the transfer into your new one, like you don't need to be stressed about it, because the middle part about all these transactions are always kind of quiet. Right. The busy part is in the beginning, the end when you're trying to close. Those are the busiest ones. The middle is just processing, but you can't do anything. It's just a matter of time. Right. Right. So that was the biggest challenge. Is just letting time pass, right? Because you live in a moment, you want to have immediate gratification, but this is a process where that'll never happen. Sure. And so just finding a way to pass time, hoping for the best was challenging at times, but everything transacted on time, without problems, and you're here. The day we closed was the peak. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. It was absolutely incredible. And I think even as you go through that journey, people can hear this themselves. I mean, on one end, like I said, it's always going to be easier to do nothing. The status quo is always easier, right? It's always easier to not go to the gym. It's the same logic, right? But at the same time,
once this is done, then it's in this case it's done, like I said, for a very long time. So I think that's the most important thing too, is also the whole purpose of why one is doing it. Right? It's so hard to go on and off. It's just like if you were running for a marathon and you go on and off the treadmill every month or every year. You're not going to do that well. But as long as you commit to it and you're actively doing it, you're going to get better and better. But in this case, unlike the marathon, once it's done, it's actually done. You don't have to worry about it for a long time. So I appreciate this interview. I remember as soon as we went through the journey and as soon as we closed, I was like, people have got to hear about this, because it was my personally first contingent on sale, because that is crazy rare. And it's still today. Like, I still don't advocate for it because there's so many things that has to work right. But you just never know. Like, to be fair, I think even when we spoke about it, this is not caught up in the beginning. We were going to do contingent on sale to likely a specific time, right? So the thing that we discussed was like, okay, I have no issues doing this for X amount of months because you were accruing money. And that's the difference, right? The strategy may be different as you accrue more money, different finances may occur, like different things. You're naturally accruing more money. So our strategy may not have been the same if we were in spring, or 6, 7, 8 months later, or a year later. I don't know, right? And so, but I also was like, look, I have no problems doing it. Like, this is not wasting time. Now, if you're making lowball offers and making contingent on sale, then I'm like, this is straight wasting time. But we're like, yeah, everything was aligned. Of course, we got to somehow get one seller to agree. But that's also the thing. You just need one seller to agree, and it's over.
And
right?
it happened to be the first.
And that happened to be the first one, right? And so you just never know. And we still gave it a shot. It was, even when we ran numbers, it was like, okay, it was tough. Like, even when we kind of forecasted where this would be, we were pretty accurate of like where it was likely to be competitive wise, where the others offers were. So it still was tough, but it was doable. And when I saw those numbers of like what this is worth and where you're going to try to go out, I was like, we got to give it a try. Yeah. And fortunately, it all worked out. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
I hope a lot of people get to enjoy this, and we'll see you at the next one.